Hey there! It's been a while since the last devlog, about 3 months since the last update on the game, and I've made a lot of progress on the game since then. However, I've been doing a lot of other things too. I've been studying game design, I've been learning about marketing, and I have been learning about my mistakes that I made when making Loop Loader for the GMTK Game Jam. But that's not what this video is going to be about today. I'm thinking more on the lines of talking about the game design behind Nodosis, and why Nodosis's design might be bad. For example, what 3 things would you say are the most important aspects of a generic video game? You might be tempted to say the graphics or the sounds and the gameplay, but I believe that these terms are actually misleading when discussing game design, because it's not the art that's important, it's actually the presentation of the art and its cohesiveness. For example, if you're making a pixel art game with a distinctive color palette and style, it might be tempting to make your art high quality using 3D models. You know, because 3D models are just better. But it's misleading that making your art better quality will automatically make your game better quality, because it's important that the level of quality of your art style stays consistent. And if 90% of your game is made up of 8x8 pixel sheets, but the other 10% are detailed Blender models, then the high quality 10% of your game is actually going to detriment the experience players will have. And the mistake that I've made with Nodosis was not planning ahead enough with my art, because the key to having good enough quality art while also keeping the style consistent is to consider what your game will look like even before you start designing it. Some of the art in Nodosis is consistent, and I've tried keeping some of the pixel arts I've made similar in style, and of course I used a color palette. But the problem here is the background environment. The background in the game is not pixel art, it visually stands out too much, and it's not bound by any color palette. Meaning the colors of the background are set to whatever I set the number of the color to. So the number one most important part of any video game is not the quality of the art, but the consistency of the art. When I see games like The Last of Us and He Is Coming being so contrastically different in their art, it's easy to just assume that clearly one's better than the other. But in terms of consistency, both games have it nailed. How much you like how the art looks is up to personal opinion. But the defining factor in the quality of most, if not all games, is the consistency of the art. For the second and third most important aspects of a game, I would consider to be the agency and marketability of a game. Agency defined in game design is whatever the action player takes to produce a particular result. And agency is commonly brought up in game design through things like video game shops or items, things for the player to interact with, collect, touch, press, move around. Whatever the player feels like they're interacting with the game is the agency. Looking at video game agency solely in this way is a little bit misleading, because yeah, it's very important to consider what the player should be interacting with your game, but what does the player interact with the most above all else? The UI, or user interface. Basically the buttons on the screen, the settings menu, the numbers, the stats. These are all the most commonly interacted things within your game as a form of agency. And it should be obvious, but if your game's UI sucks, then the entire game will suck, relative to whether it had better UI. And for my Nodosis, it's a game heavily inspired by Balatro. But Balatro didn't blow up just because it was fun or because it was related to poker, but because Balatro is a very UI-centric game. The agency of the game is perfect, and Local Thunk designed his UI and agency to be top tier from the very start of production. And since the agency of Balatro is so good, the player feels absolutely truly immersed within the game, like they've been sucked into some kind of mystical wormhole. That kind of an experience wouldn't be possible if the numbers didn't light on fire, the text didn't float, if all the texts were the same color, nor if the descriptions of the jokers and cards weren't carefully considered. All of these kinds of UI/agency considerations are so important to get right because they form the very backbone of a video game. It's hard to build up an immersive game if the design layout of the user interface was scrappy. And sadly, for Nodosis, the UI/agency of the game was bad from the very start. And lastly, the marketability of your game is very important too. I understand this is an extremely controversial statement. A lot of people don't like to consider how their game might be marketed. But I believe that every game should seriously consider to whom and for who a game is for. If you're making a niche indie game, then it's very important that you focus your attention solely on making your game for that one niche and its audience. You really better make sure that your game really scratches that itch that this niche audience wants from your game, and you need to make sure that they're aware your game is capable of doing that. For example, Nubby's Number Factory. From an outside perspective, this seems like a really unmarketable product, an uninteresting game, but most people find enjoyment from video games not from a skin-deep assumption, but from a deeper personal level. And when you look deeper into a game like Nubby's Number Factory, you can begin to see that this game has perfect marketability. And that's probably why it has been so successful as a game. Because the core concept of Nubby's Number Factory is that you build numbers. The numbers just keep going up. And the niche audience that Nubby's Number Factory was designed for exactly wants that. They were looking for a game that lets them create large numbers. And look closer. In Nubby's Number Factory, Nubby, the ball, is distinctly visible in the game's capsule art. You know exactly who you're playing as. And the numbers too. You can immediately tell from the capsule art that the game involves numbers. And look at the name too. Nubby's Number Factory? What does that sound like? It sounds like a game where you run a factory that produces numbers. And of course, factories produce a lot of stuff, so from the title alone, you can immediately tell that this game involves numbers, and there's a lot of them. Everything about this game is marketing gold, and it's no wonder so many people within the big number niche were willing to give this a try. And for my game, Nodosis, it's also supposed to appeal to the same kind of big number niche, and in my game, players can end up building large numbers, but the execution towards making those numbers is at best just good enough. And since there really are no game-breaking builds that the player can work towards to getting crazy numbers, the game is forced to lean more so into strategy and decision-making. And yeah, there's people out there who are looking for a more well-rounded game like mine, but there's inherently more games out there that are going to be better than mine in each of their own individual ways. And since my game really doesn't scratch any kind of itch other than the tic-tac-toe but it's weird, Nodosis won't exactly inspire anyone. And that's kind of because it's a bland game, and I made that mistake when designing it. It is said that we learn from our mistakes more than our successes. And here I am telling you exactly what kinds of mistakes I made, and why what I was doing was wrong. Nodosis isn't released yet, and I really don't have any sales numbers to prove to you that Nodosis is a failure. If anything, however, all that I want you to take away from this video is to plan ahead. There's no harm in putting your ideas down on paper and taking the time to imagine each and every kind of scenario. And yeah, it's probable that 99% of your ideas just don't work and won't fit with the core concept of your game. But how would you ever find the things that would work perfectly if you don't take the time to note down your thoughts? Anyways, if you've enjoyed this video, please consider taking the time to leave a like. And if you think that I got something wrong in this video, then please tell me down in the comments, or go to the pre-demo itch.io page for Nodosis. Because trust me, if you play the pre-demo of Nodosis, you'll understand why it considered cohesion, agency, and marketability the three most important factors in game design, because Nodosis basically failed in each and every one of those regards. Okay, see ya.